I said, "There's nothing I enjoy more, Cephalus, than speaking with elderly men. I see them as travelers who have already walked a road I, too, must one day take. And so it makes sense to ask them whether that road is smooth or rough. That's the question I'd like to ask you, since you've reached, as the poets say, the threshold of old age. Is life more difficult at this stage, or how does it seem to you?" He replied, "I'll tell you, Socrates, how it seems to me. People my age tend to gather together. As the old saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. And when we talk, you'll usually hear the same complaints. I can't eat the way I used to. I can't drink like before. The pleasures of youth and love are gone. Life used to be good, but now it's barely worth living." Some complain about how their families treat them, about being overlooked or disrespected, and say that old age is to blame for all these troubles. But in my view, Socrates, these people are blaming the wrong thing. If old age were really to blame, then every old man would feel the same way, including me. But that's not the case. Not for me, and not for many others I've known. I remember something the poet Sophocles once said. He was asked, "How do you get along with love now, Sophocles? Are you still the same man as before?" He replied, "I'm at peace. I'm glad to have escaped it, like running away from a raging, wild master." That answer has stuck with me over the years. It seemed wise then, and it still seems wise now. Old age brings a kind of calm and freedom. When our bodily passions lose their grip over us, we're freed, not just from one crazy master, but from many. So, Socrates, I believe that these regrets and complaints aren't really caused by old age. They come from the person's character and attitude. Someone who is calm and content in themselves will find old age to be light. But for someone who has a difficult or bitter nature, no time of life, whether young or old, will be easy. Socrates opens his conversation with Cephalus with a friendly confession that he enjoys talking with older people because they have already walked the road of life the younger people are still on. He wants to know if life becomes more difficult as you get older. A wise question. Socrates treats old men not as worn out, but as guides. This echoes Christian teaching. Saint Anthony once said, "Listen to the advice of the elders, not because they are always right, but because they have more experiences of being wrong." Socrates embodies the biblical counsel of honoring elders. Stand up in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere your God. Leviticus 19:32. The framing of Socrates' question to the elder is also a reflection of the deeper truth of Christian understanding. Socrates frames life as a path. For the Greek philosopher, the philosophical journey was the path to truth, to the meaning of life, the way to deeper understanding. But for the Christian, there is a much greater wisdom. As Christ proclaims, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." John 14:6. Cephalus replies honestly. He says that some older people complain about old age, that life is no longer worth living. But Cephalus doesn't agree with them. Instead, he points to a deeper issue, the disposition of the soul. If you are calm and thankful, old age will be peaceful. But if you are angry and discontent, life will always feel heavy, whether you are young or old. This is a powerful message. Those who are of bad character will believe that losing the passions, the physical desires, to be a deep tragedy, one that robs them of the only joys of life they ever held. Yet for those of good character, it is a blessing and peace. This is profound, a rejection of fatalism and an affirmation of the moral agency of the soul. The condition of life is less important than the condition of the heart. Cephalus continues with a personal anecdote about Sophocles the poet, who was happy to be freed of his passions that controlled him and enslaved him to the whims of a wild and angry master. There is great wisdom here that is reflected in Scripture. The Bible tells us that selfish desires enslave us. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes, and pride in possessions, is not from the Father. 1 John 2:16. When we follow every craving, every desire of our body and natural instinct, we are not free. We are being dragged along by feelings that always want more. The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? Jeremiah 17:9. But when those feelings become quiet, especially in old age, we can finally rest. That is not a loss. That is peace. The early Christian monks knew this. The Desert Father, Abba Evagrius, once said, "The passions are not natural, they are distortions. The natural state is the stillness of the soul in God." Cephalus tells Socrates, "Old age has its own kind of calm. When our desires relax their grip, we are no longer ruled by many loud and wild masters. This is the peace that Scripture speaks of. In quietness and trust shall be your strength." Isaiah 30:15. And the joys of spiritual life when freed of the physical passions. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Psalm 37:4. When we no longer chase the empty pleasures of youth, we can find deeper joy in God, in prayer, in friends, and in pure, simple moments. St. Augustine wrote, "The soul is heavy when it gives into desires, but it is lifted up when it loves God." Cephalus ends with an important truth. The problem is not old age, but people's character. A good man will have peace at every age. A troubled man will never be happy, not even in youth. The Apostle Paul shows us this in his letter to the Philippians. "I have learned to be content, whatever the situation. I can do all things through Christ, who gives me strength." Philippians 4:11-13. If our heart is restless, then youth, money, and the bodily pleasures won't fix that. But if our heart is at peace with God, we can be joyful, even in sickness, even in weakness. The world teaches us to fear getting old, but God urges us to welcome it. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. 2 Corinthians 4:16. Getting old doesn't mean dying. It means instead greater preparations for heaven. Socrates was wise to ask questions of the elderly, and we too should honor those who have walked ahead of us. But even more than that, we should let God shape us now, so that as we grow older, we grow closer to Him, not further away. Don't chase the desires that fade. Chase God, who gives a peace that never ends.